budget workshop Tuesday, July 30th, 2024. I'd like to stand for pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, add roll, please.
Mayor John Aaron Cooper.
Here.
Vice Mayor Linda Rodriguez.
Here.
Councilman David Mueller.
Here.
Councilman Robert Hubbard.
Here.
Councilwoman Lisa Burke.
Here.
City Manager Matthew Koppler.
Here. Thank you. First up, comments from the general public. We are empty in here today, so we'll move along. No sign-ups, nobody in the audience. To comments from city manager. Pass to Mr. Koppler for his comments.
No comments.
Moving on to comments from the mayor, city council. I'll start with Councilwoman Burke. Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
Good, thank you very much.
Councilman Hubbard. Councilman Mueller. I have none as well.
Put your speaker on, Dave. I've got to do mine too, thank you.
Okay, moving on to council business. Item number 1, fiscal year 2025 budget discussion. I will pass it to Mr. Koppler for his wonderful budget presentation.
Well, thank you. So we already had one meeting where we talked a little bit about the Penny for Pasco CIP as well as the stormwater utility fund. Today is the continuation of that journey where we hope to be able to get through a number of the different departments today, talking about what's in the budget for next year, provide you the opportunity to ask any questions and what you see. I've prepared a PowerPoint. Doesn't have a lot of information, different than what you have, but it kind of helps focus us on the process going forward today. So hopefully it will be somewhat revealing to you, so it either evokes a lot of questions or it answers a lot of questions. So we'll find out.
Give me just a second.
So the general fund budget, which primarily all we're going to be covering tonight, is covered within the general fund. Unfortunately, Public Works and Utilities, the people that I need to be there at that meeting, or this meeting, are not here this week, so we're not able to handle those. We'll cover that in a different meeting. So tonight, just general fund. Proposed fiscal year 25 general fund is $8,108,796. It represents a 3.36% increase over fiscal year 24's budget. Some of the things to keep in mind from the revenue side is one, I've provided you what the mill rate is currently for fiscal year 2024, which is 6.53. You might recall from the document that we presented at the last council meeting for all the trim notifications we had to do. The rollback rate would represent 6.3782. So within the general fund revenues, there are some things that are increased over the current year that are notable that you should keep in mind. First off, the tax roll has increased this year by a little bit over 10. I think it's like 10.8%, if I'm not mistaken, but a little over 10%. There is an increase in the impound lot revenues within the general fund, increase in interest earnings. We're using some building department reserves, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the building department conversation. And there's also $40,000 in revenues budgeted for sponsorships. Keep in mind that we have two big events coming up the next fiscal year. One, of course, 4th of July, if you want to continue with that particular event, but also our centennial. So I kind of split it out in a process looking at saying, 20,000. There's good potential we get 20,000 for the 4th of July sponsorships, and another 20,000 for the centennial sponsorships. One thing that I do want to point out on the revenue that then we're still looking at and really trying to understand the significance from the current year into next year's estimate is in the red light camera revenues and in the expenditure side. I think this is something that I hope to have resolved, at least in my mind, where we're going to be for the current year and be able to project that out next year. But until we have kind of a placeholder number in there. As you might know, we have red light cameras, and generally we've been trending up from each year in the past. I think it was 1.6, 1.7 in previous budget years. If you look at the revenues year to date this year, you'll see those numbers are a lot lower from a projection standpoint to where we should be at the end of this year. And that may or may not have an impact on our budget this year. And that's because there are really three different costs or three different ways that money is applied. So one thing is the service for those lights is running about $23,000 to $24,000 a month. So that number is a fixed cost, or within a fixed cost. It varies a little bit every month. But we know that we're going to be receiving that every month for 12 months. The other cost is what we pay in those fees collected to the state. Again, that's a variable cost, a greater variable cost, because if you get a ticket, a portion of the ticket citation goes to the state. The remainder stays with us. And so that revenue of I think this year's budget is 1.7, doesn't all come to us. It doesn't all stay with us. And so again, what we need to figure out is why are the revenues down? And I'll tell you the reason the revenues are down is because the tickets are down. But we had to find out why the tickets are down. And once we have a good answer to that, we can then start projecting going forward next year. So that could be a number that, as we go through this process, needs to be adjusted. So I just want you to be aware of that. And again, I think we're trending right now probably at about 1.3 million. So that could be a significant hit.
Are we behind in processing those? Is that what you want?
I don't have a good answer to that. Again, as we're looking at the budget, I find these things and we start looking at them over the back. So we just need to get a good understanding. That's really it. I mean, there's some other small increases here or there from the general fund revenue, but these are really the biggest drivers of the increase.
The tax receipts, are those property taxes?
Yeah,
Is that where are the 10%? Where is that? Is that Keys at Cody River, or is it aggregate, or?
No, it's just
Or
generally
just in
overall
general?
the whole,
Okay.
the whole city. The values of the properties increase.
So that doesn't include the taxes from the Keys at Cody River. That
I don't know how much. I mean, there could be. There's typically appraisers, assessors will do a interim assessment of a property. So if like you're halfway done at the time when they're doing the assessment of the property for tax roll, they would give value to that land over what was there the previous year. But I don't know. I wouldn't expect it to be 100% in this year, but it could be. Because again, they start to process very early in the year. So it just depends upon at what point the assessment team was out there with that.
That could also come from whenever a house sells, it could lose its homestead and escalate up value. And certainly any new construction that occurred in our city would be added to the rolls as well. So,
the reason I picked Cody, the Keys, was because obviously it's a large development with a huge impact on. I mean, that's a lot of residences in there. I don't remember the exact number, but there's a lot. So there's potentially that 10% could go up if that tax base is not in there yet. Sorry to interrupt, sorry.
Actually, it would be nice if it's not, if we get some projection what that would be adding
Yeah,
next year.
I've just made a note. Just look at that and see.
Thank you.
No problem. That was a quick overview of the revenues. On the expenditure side, the number looks very similar. The proposed 25 is $8,108,786. Balanced budget, and again, it's a 3.36% increase over budgeted FY2020. Some of the things to keep in mind in terms of factors that are affecting all expense accounts here in the city. We are at a point right now as we're working with a consultant on our health care that where we're at today is about a 5% increase in healthcare costs. You're going to get the full presentation on this at the next meeting because we're going to be making a recommendation to actually move away from PRM and going out on our own with the healthcare as well as the liability property. In doing that, unfortunately, it's not apples to apples in terms of what the healthcare benefits are, and we're trying to match the closest plan that we can find outside of PRM, and again, provide maybe even some better benefits through this process. But we're working on that. We're supposed to be getting final and best rates within the next day or so, but I would expect that the closest to apples change that we're going to be doing is probably going to be in that 2 to 3.5% increase over the current year's numbers. Had we stayed with PRM, we were looking at a 10.8 or 10.9% increase. So we had to do something to be able to manage it. On the property liability side, even though what we're looking at is a 12.6% increase over what we currently have in the budget, in reality, it's actually less than what when we move to PGIT, which is another trust, similar to PRM, but a different pool of cities. It's actually a decrease, but unfortunately, when you pull out of the PRM trust, you have to pay run out. And the run out, they're projecting to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $38,000. So, though it represents an increase, if we stayed with PRM, it would probably be about a 13 to 14% increase for the upcoming year. But with this, we're going to be resetting what our overall cost structure is with those property and liability. And I didn't put up there that we're actually getting a decrease in our workers' comp. So it actually is less than a 12% increase, but with workers' comp considered in that. We're still working. There's some negotiation with PRM on the run out because they base it on a certain number of claims from here to the end of the year. We think it's not a realistic number. I think they were estimating 9 claims to be filed within the next 2 months, which is not necessarily the rate at which we're filing claims. So we're going to be working still to try to reduce that. So that cost should come down a little bit more. But again, we will be going forward. Our cost structure will be less than what would be if we stayed with PRM. It's relatively not a lot of difference.
Question for that. You talk about that run out. Is that based on actuals or is that a projection?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of actual, but the big number is the number of expected claims. As I said, they're projecting, I think the number was 9. And we just think that where they get that number, we can't figure out because that's not the rate at which we are filing claims with them. So.
And this is based upon sins of the past, right? Things that have occurred already prior to us leaving.
Yeah,
their
could
support.
be. Actually, they don't.
Future too.
They don't provide a lot of information. You just ask, and they say, "Here's what it is," and then we have to go back and try to, reduce it down.
Got it. Thank you.
And so with that, let's kick off. We're going to start with the police department. Two components within the police department, obviously, dispatch and police. Now, I know the decision has been made to move forward with contracting out dispatch. And so we have made some changes within the budget lines, and we'll point those out as we go through this. But understand that it's probably going to be about a 6-month transition to actually get to the contracted solution. We hope it'll be shorter, but that's what we've been told. So because of that, we're going to be about 4 months into next year's budget when that changeover is going to happen. And so what I decided to do this year was just keep the two different what I call cost centers there. And then in next year's budget, we can deal with how we want to start accounting for it. But right now, so you'll see dispatch and police. You can see that dispatch budget this year represents a 6% increase over the previous year, and police is representing a 10% increase over last year. One thing I think it was in this particular department, the number on the FRS, Florida Retirement System, was a little, in my mind, not where I thought it should be, a little bit higher than what I would expect. And so we're going to be going back looking at that to verify those numbers. So again, this is a process in progress. And as we go through it, we're trying to make sure that the numbers that we have are going to be good numbers going forward. I laid out kind of the overview of the positions within the police department that are going to be covered under these two budgets. And then just some of the substantial changes for fiscal year 2025. Obviously, the big one, dispatch going to the county. So what I've done is I've actually put the dispatch costs, I've basically divided it between the police and fire. So when you get to fire, you're going to see a number for them. I split it going into this 65-35. That's probably not going to be the final, a couple of years from now when we look at this, that probably won't be the same split as we see today. But we'll be working to, make that a very accurate or as accurate as possible number going forward. But we put the number for the county in the professional services in this account. One of the things to understand, I don't have the ability to change line item names or create them. So I had to kind of put them in areas. Usually I wouldn't put it in a professional services. I would have it in a contractual services line account, like you'll see in the fire, but in police, for some reason, it didn't exist. So I couldn't create it. So this year it's going in professional services in the police department. And then the only, another thing with that is also, we're going to be reclassifying at some point the dispatchers from dispatchers to whatever it is we're going to be calling them. I just put it in there again for my own purposes, the name. I have it as a police aide, but again, that's not going to be the final name of that. It's just, again, a placeholder from my standpoint. And then the only other thing is within the changes, dramatic changes, is that, of course, the contract with the PBA called for a 3.5% wage increase for the officers. And I'm going to shut up for a second, turn it over to the chief to see if he has any comments or anything on the budget. And then once he's done, we'll open it up for questions.
As far as the budget increases, obviously going to be salaries and benefits. Majority of we did at one point request an increase in the overtime only because the last year's budget was set before we got the PBA contract completed and signed, and there was no compensation as far as the increase time anyone had to work overtime, go to court or whatever. So it was not enough money. There's still not enough money in the budget to compensate for that. So we asked for an increase in that line item, and everything else is pretty much status quo. Except for the Marine unit, we did ask to double that because of the new vessel, but it was only $3,000 last year anyway. So we really don't have too many increases as far as operational costs. But you'll see that in the coming meetings.
Before I open up for questions on this, I also point out, as you look at the current budget as well as actuals from previous years, in different line items, you'll see, the numbers being, less than what you would predict. I'm assuming that, when it comes to salaries, both in dispatch and police, there were a number of open positions at different points in time, so that's going to have an impact on what is actually spent out on those line items related to benefits as well as the actual salaries. Of course, the other side is probably going to see higher overtime in those years as well, that kind of offset a little bit of that. But that was one of the things I know. When you look at how to project forward, kind of look at what the last several years numbers are. And one of the things that's kind of striking in our budgets to me is how little predictability there is from year to year in the line items. So that makes it a little bit more difficult, I think, in creating a good predictive model going forward. But, again, we're all kind of new. So we're going to start with a different set of eyes and look at how to make that 5-year projection, which I'm trying to build, work with the numbers we have in the past. So, questions?
Can you roll back to the staffing number of this slide? So positions here, does that reflect all of the with the dispatch changing? That's how many aides we're going to. There's so many part-time, and I forget what the staffing you had laid out for that.
Yeah, so this does reflect that. So based upon the projected post consolidation, we would have 4, again, whatever you want to call those positions, full-time, and 2 being effectively budgeted 2 in part-time wages. But again, I think the actual number is less than a full-time position. I can't remember what that number is.
Yeah, since it was across the board, 23, 24, 25, there was no change.
Correct.
Staffing.
Yep.
And so our current staffing, we're down 2 officers, just 1. And then as far as the dispatch aides, I guess we're down 3.
We have 3 and 4, the 4th one's in training.
Okay. Everything else is filled. Yeah. And, was there any discussion about adding potential corporal positions in the budget?
Well, there is the way that the chief does it. So I believe on the position description for the detective, that's considered a corporal position.
Yes, right.
So there is already, the thought process involved with that. I know that's something you've talked to me about, saying that could be a way to help.
And retaining the officers,
Right.
Because they can't move anywhere until they make sergeant. And there's also my understanding, some supervisory capabilities. If the sergeant's not on site or whatever, they can do some supervisor stuff, which would be probably helpful for some of the officers.
Yeah.
Anybody else got any questions?
So what you're saying then is the only person that is eligible for that is the detective, so there's just 1. Correct?
Yeah. So it's, again, and I don't know the significance of this. I just know that in the position descriptions for our police department, if you look, the detective position is detective/corporal. Again, I don't know necessarily if it it is paid differently than the others, but outside of that, I don't know what the significance of that title is.
Well, the expert is sitting right here, so maybe none of us here are experts. So
The detective corporal position, if you will, is also has the capability to be a supervisor. Matter of fact, she's probably going to be supervising the road tomorrow. There is a potential for another corporal's position, but that is not until we get a second canine. If we get a second canine, then there'll be a possibility for a second corporal's position.
would a corporal position in our city be beneficial to our officers, in your opinion?
It could be. I think before I arrived here, they had a couple of corporal positions in lieu of sergeant's positions. But once I did arrive here, there were no corporals. There were just 4 sergeants. So we brought back the detective as a corporal, as a quasi, and we're looking at possibly doing another corporal, I said, as a canine.
Is a corporal range a different pay range, or is it within one of these that we have listed here?
It would be a slight increase for corporal.
Significant or just,
It's not significant.
not significant? Okay. All right, thank you.
I have the same sort of question about the canine officer. You don't have that listed here. The canine officer hasn't been replaced yet, correct?
No. We
And-
have
but
a
they're
entry
not-
coming up.
And that person is not listed differently.
No, they're
They're
not.
the FDR.
All of our officers their primary function is patrol. Their ancillary duties are marine or traffic or canine.
So you said we're missing one. Is that the one we're missing?
Yes.
The canine officer. So
And I have one more question about wages. I don't know about the police. I have not spoken to anybody. I've spoken to other employees. After our increase last year, it was my understanding that everybody was getting increases last year. And in fact, that did not happen. Every employee did not get wage increase last year, from what I'm being told. So does this, every police officer will get a 3.5 wage increase, or is it depending on, like, some people will, like, they changed positions, and so therefore, even though they were here for an extended period of time, their position change did not allow them to get an increase, and they did not. So I kind of really,
Well,
I don't have details because I don't recall, because this has been told to me over the past 9 months.
so
multiple
the
times.
police is a negotiated contract,
Right.
so it follows whatever the contract calls for. But again, if whatever range that they fall in, whichever step, that's where they would be.
I just want to make sure our employees, our employees are our key to running this city, and I want to make sure our employees are taken care of. So if we can, I don't know, make sure that our employees are taken care of financially, because I know I would want to be if I was, I am an employee, so.
And just, well,
That's
my understanding.
going to be my consistent question throughout this is our employees.
And just, again, my understanding wasn't here. at that
I know you
point.
weren't, that's why.
But
I
my
know.
understanding is every employee did get a
They
pay.
did not.
So maybe afterwards you can let me know who it is and we
Well, I
can
don't
look.
know. I'd have to go. Like, again, this has been discussed over
Okay.
9 months. People have been mentioning this to me, so I'd have to go back and,
And
or we can pull the rolls and see.
Yeah,
who,
that's what I say. I
we can pull it and see who got it, and maybe they're pulling my leg. I don't know.
Yeah, that's
But
what I was saying.
you have the black and white
yeah,
copy
I
of
can
that. We can
easily,
do
Yeah, I can easily do. That's what I was saying.
Yeah. That'd be great. I would really like that because I really want to make sure that they're taken care of because they take care of me. So, thank you.
If I can ask one more question on the whole corporal thing. And I know, I kind of think about this from the military. There's certain ways you can kind of progress within your rank, and obviously you have that too among the different positions or whatever. If we were to look at, because I think it's a concern, and obviously we don't pay the best here to city, and so if the better career path we can provide, the more longevity we can expect out of the employees to stay if there's a place to go. And if, like I said, we've got 4 sergeants here, and those are all occupied. There's no upward mobility until one of those leave, or the one detective. Is corporal something that we could look at as being, after you've been here a certain amount of time, you meet the qualifications that you could progress with that, and not necessarily cap that as a certain number? Like we don't have 2 corporals, so in theory we could have everybody could be corporals if they stayed with us long enough, but they would they would operate without the supervisor capability unless it was needed. You follow what I'm saying? It's kind of like another step in as an officer. You can move to corporal, but you only use the responsibility if you are in a situation where you need that, where you're only.
So you're like if you're here like 5 years, you become a corporal or whatever.
I'm not recommending that it would be a given based time frame. If a person stays with the department and they are eligible to move up, but there's no spot above them, then corporal's always, at least that's available to move into.
I've never seen that in a
So
professional
would that be a
setting.
name only? Or would it be
Well, no, it'd be the
wages
title.
also?
I've never seen that in a professional setting. That does not make any sense to me.
Well, if you think about on smaller scale things, you may have a finance director that doesn't have necessarily a whole staff of people underneath them. They kind of do it all. Again, I don't know. In certain instances, when you have small entities, you can progress to a title that doesn't necessarily. That's not limited. It's not like you can only have two corporals. In this instance, you can only have two corporals. You could have theoretically all your officers could progress to that if they were, and we wouldn't have any officers. They would be corporals. It's just it's kind of like in the military. You have you can go up to E4, and then at that point you switch over to a non-commissioned officer. But you can pretty much progress up that. You can be E1, E2, E3, E4. Now I think we have time and grade for officer, right? So many years is how they're based, but they're always an officer. Whereas this would be rank, but it's not necessarily a limited position.
He runs the department,
I
so
just-
I would leave that up to your discretion as to how you want to run the department. I don't.
I'm not asking James Phil, you're right. I just is that something we could? Is that even plausible? Again, I'm not a police officer, so I don't know if that's something that's practiced at all. Or,
I think it would be more appropriate if we had more people. In other words, if the community increases and it requires us to increase our manpower to correlate with that increase in population, then we could look at something like that. But the way we're presently constructed, I don't think so. Okay.
I know it's important to have career progression. Thanks.
I got a question on this 28. Lisa brought up we got an unfilled position. Are all our positions in the 28, or is there 29? And what
28 is the maximum number.
That's our head
Maximum
count.
number.
Budgeted number.
So we're actually running at 27. And what's baked in the budget is 28. Okay, that's what I wanted. Thanks.
Planning department. So budgeted this year is 1.288673, which is an 8% increase over the current year budgeted. And I've provided you a layout of the staffing numbers that we have within the budget. This real quick. So some of the changes to keep in mind, again, we have the dispatch going to the county. In contractual services, we've added $32,200 for the fire department share of those costs. And although it doesn't seem like a big number, I think from a standpoint of what it means capability of wise, it is an important thing is that we are in the process of moving to ALS. And I wanted to call that out by saying that there's a little bit of an increase in the medical supplies because of that. Turn it over to who wants to talk? Not him, right?
Stand up talking.
Tom ran a pretty tight budget request across the board. There's not really much changes at all. The only things when you look at this that may flag your eye is most of them, Bossman already mentioned. It's the line item for dispatch, and then line item for the supplies, and most of that's the cost of drugs. They're expensive to get, but so most of those costs are going to be for the drugs and some of those ALS medical supplies that we need. We also added a line item for the boat that may catch your eye for the shared use of the boat and shared expenses and costs associated with that. And then the only other thing that may also jump out at you is when you look in the part-time salaries line item, that number went up significantly, projected, but we had dropped it some. Well, that's that process of us trying to find out whatever happened to and reinstitute the deputy chief position that we had lost. So we've been, those numbers were coming from is the increase in the inspection fees that we had added. So you'll see that number, and then that's coupled with our part-time salaries itself. So that increase in that number, and then that slight drop was, we had a projected cost. We weren't sure what that was going to be. That came in a little bit lower. So Mr. Cobbler had lowered that number to a more reasonable number to make sure that we're in line and in budget. But that's what that's for. Right, currently, that's budgeting a part-time fire inspector, again, with our longer range goal of trying to fill that position that we had lost a long time ago. And meanwhile, us trying to find ways to fund that. That's the only other things that everything else is almost exact. Other than routine cost increases for supplies or whatever it may be.
With the new fire inspection fees and stuff like that, are we recognizing additional revenue going forward next year?
Yes, sir.
So,
I got them.
Good.
Yeah, you've incurred 17,000.
It's actually a little bit higher than that, I think, but
Well,
there's
this-
a little bit of a delay between when the check actually comes in to when it actually hits that. But yeah.
Well, I know that's the difference between cash basis accounting and accrual basis accounting. So this is what was in the books at the time I got the numbers. So 17 and budgeted last year was 36K. You're budgeting 25K this year. So your increment is a little less than last year, but if you're a little more aggressive, certainly get out there and beat the bushes and
and so with that, you know, is I think there's hope and there's reality in trying to predict future revenues, and I think maybe the number in the current year was the hope more so than what the reality is. This number that I put in reflects more of the reality, but I still have hope. And you'll see mostly in revenues, I'm not going to budget the top number that I think is going to be there. I'm going to budget a number that I think is obtainable. And so that one, I think the first year is always the rough year in establishing it. You know, one, from the standpoint of getting people used to what they have to pay. So it takes a little bit more time to, you know, get those monies in. Took time to get the program rolled out. You know, there's just a lot of lost time. And so I think there is hope that we'll do better in upcoming years. I'm just not ready to budget hope this year. I'm optimistic we'll do better than what I have here, but I think it's a good number that you can stand on and look and say, okay, this is a reasonable number to.
no 25. But I think that's right on target. Run rate on the 17 puts us at 20, almost 22. So that's a little bit of bump. I think that's a good number. I turned it green.
Did you? Yeah. Good to know.
That's all I have. Unless anybody's got questions. Did you have anything to miss anything? I mean, this is your baby.
All the other increases are just general across the board increases that are predicted to 3 to 5%.
Same thing with salaries. Thank you.
Yeah, squeaky chair.
There you go.
Did you budget for that?
Did not.
WD-40, probably $8 a bottle now.
I can give you mine, sir. I wore my squeaker out because I don't sit still.
We good with fire? Oh, okay.
Hurry up, go something else before they talk. Ask for some more stuff.
They would never do that. So then we're moving to building department and code enforcement. And again, in this particular presentation, I've just kind of lumped them together, but trying to break them out. And so we'll go department by department here. But again, just trying to have fewer slides. Building department, you'll see that the proposed FY25 is $417,440, and you may be knocked back by that 38% increase, but it's explainable. And then on code enforcement, the proposed FY25 is $100,249, which is actually a decrease over the budgeted FY24. And again, we can explain that. I think as you look at the position table here, what I want to draw your attention to, if it hasn't already been drawn to it, is two positions. One, the building inspector / code enforcement, and then the code enforcement officer. You can see that looking at the code enforcement officer line, you'll see there was 1 in 23, 2 budgeted for the current fiscal year, but next year is only 1. What I've done is in looking at the operations of the departments, the nearly 10 months I've been here, the need, I believe, the need in the department is one that I can't justify 100% of a code enforcement officer. But what I can see the need for is kind of this hybrid position where we have a building inspector competency as well as code enforcement. That's going to give us it's going to give us some flexibility both on the code enforcement side to do some of, picking up some of the things that can be done on the code enforcement aspects, but even more so looking at our building department and seeing, if it's our intentions to change, the way that we go about doing business. We want to be, I think the term is business friendly, people like to use. It does take additional staffing to do those things. And on the building side, I believe, having someone that can do building inspections will not only allow us to do more and spend more effort with individuals that are coming in for their building permits and such, but also free up a little bit more time of our building official to do some of the things he's doing now that, are kind of being either lost or slowed down. As we look at, as an example, as we look at the code changes that we've been talking about, and we haven't even scratched the surface on the code changes yet. It takes hours upon hours to go through these and make the changes. Mike has to be pulled 6-7 different directions. Could be in a meeting with me, could be planning, all these things that he's away from doing his main duty, which is, doing building inspections, working with the residents, working with contractors, gets pulled away from. And so I think a better use of the money is to look at that hybrid position of a building inspector / code enforcement person. The difference is that it's a little bit more expensive than the code enforcement officer, because again, we're going to be getting someone with licenses that we wouldn't been asking for under the code enforcement officer. And just so you know, the numbers we have in the budget for next year, there's about an $8,000 difference between a code official and this building inspector concept. So I'll let Mike maybe talk a little bit more about that, but not yet.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
I just want to go through a couple other things real quick. Another cost that was added to this year's budget, you'll remember that council approved the city starting with Forerunner, which is the floodplain management software that we're in the process of implementing right now. That's a $14,000+ increase to the budget. And then the second thing that really is one of the big costs in this is replacing $50,000 in contingencies from the building reserve. And this represents something that actually, when Rachel was here, we had a lot of dialogue on this, because historically what would happen is there'd be something that would come up, and we would say, oh, we'll take that from the building reserve. Ultimately, there has to be an adjustment to the budget. Usually that's done at the end of the year, right? But in the course of the year, you're going to be running negative. So our way to solve that is, okay, we're going to budget a contingency. Doesn't mean we're going to use it. It just means it's there. It's covered in the budget, so we know that it's there. The auditors know it's there, and we can use it if the need arises. So it's just really, from our perspective, a better way to handle a practice that's been done in the past that is a little bit more transparent. Because again, from your perspective, you don't see those expenditures until the end when we have to do a budget adjustment. And to me, that's not the way we need to do it. So using the contingencies is a better way. You know it's there, and you can save time doing those budget amendments every time. Because that was really the choice that I laid out, is either we have to come up with another way to find the budget, or to budget that, or we need to do the amendments every time we're going to use it. And that would slow it down. That being said, now what?
Before we do that, go back one slide to the staff. I didn't see any, you mentioned about potentially a planning resource.
Yeah. So early on, there's two needs that I see within the building. One is this position. The one that was in my mind early on was a planning person as well. Don't get me wrong, I still think there's a need for that in what we're doing. As you see what we're doing right now, going through all these different planning processes. It's either we have an employee doing it, or we're having a consultant, and we're having a consultant do most of the work for us. Honestly, it comes down to a budget number. Would love to have both in there, but I think this one actually achieves more goals in terms of developing the interaction with our residents and contractors and businesses in a way that makes more sense than with the planner. And later on, we'll talk a little bit about another position I'm going to propose to you that actually could fill that role as well.
Okay. Mike, you have some color to add?
Your turn.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Matt was saying, statute changed last year to where we can, as building officials now, we can bring on a provisional inspector. Basically, I can train them, teach them and everything, and they can have a provisional license through the state, through BBPR. It could be anywhere from 6 months, it could be anywhere to 2 years. Provisional license expires in 2 years. So they get the training, basically an on-the-job training, mentored by myself, and take the testing and everything else like that. It's a full license. They would basically work under my license while they're doing it as my shadow. By doing it this way, we can stay within the parameters of keeping both a code enforcement and an inspector as a dual role. Because to get a fully licensed building inspector right now is about $80,000 a year. That's what it costs. That's the going rate for a building inspector right now. So, I talked to Matt, by doing it this way, it keeps our budget down. It gives me a little bit of reprieve on my end to where I can get further into the codes, get further into the statutes, get more into could be more potential development coming in dealing with residents and contractors on a more basis. Because right now, the only time I can really meet with businesses and stuff is I don't do inspections on Fridays because that's when I do most of my appointments. Residents, contractors, anybody else, unless I can fit it in somewhere in the schedule. So I went to Matt a while back and I said, look, can we do this? Is there a possibility to do this just to give me a little bit more help? Because a lot of the stuff, I'd say 90% of the stuff, that's not even that one. 80% of the stuff that's in the building department has to be done by somebody who's licensed by the state. So that's helping me out. And then it's also helping us out on the code side too, because code and building works hand in hand, just like we do with PD and just like we do with FD. So that's kind of like what
I think that's a great approach. I think.
And let me just add another back of the mind piece of this is also that it does set up the possibility of succession. The Mike's, in case Mike wants to retire someday. It does start because if you haven't heard this, building officials are very expensive, and the reason that they're very expensive is because they have great taste. Is because there are fewer and fewer of those available, and any way cities can help start building the capacity within and moving up, I think makes a lot of sense. So as Mike's saying that maybe short term we can get by with the costs we're having, but my thought is if we hire someone in this position and we really want to keep them, we have to be thinking down the road 2 to 3 years that we're probably, when they get fully licensed, start moving them up. And again, I think with development moving forward in the city in some capacity, hopefully, it'll be worth, we'll have the financial capacity to absorb that cost at that time.
It's like somebody working under a somebody else's construction license. It's basically the same thing, training. And they work their way up until they can do the
they
testing.
do. There's multiple ways. There's doing it that way. We can do a 2-year intern program or something. This is the easiest way. And to piggyback on what Matt said, if I have to go to, because I have to do a certain amount of continuing education hours and keep up on everything else, just like you guys do. So if I'm out, there's nobody doing inspections.
Right.
This way, if we got somebody who can fall under that, or we're contracting out to where I came from a private provider that I was doing inspections and stuff in the city, and as your interim building official, you're paying them $140 to $150 an hour with a 4-hour minimum. So this way, somebody's in place. We can mentor them. I can mentor them, get them through the process, build them up. So, like Matt said, eventually fill in my absence, or eventually take over.
And the difference is between that with bringing somebody in and training them. It's just that you said an $8,000 difference.
No,
Roughly?
that difference is between the code enforcement officer concept and this concept.
Right. Yeah, $8,000 difference just to change that.
Yeah, instead of just doing one code enforcement officer, period, and still being in the same situation. Now we have a dual role that we can make that work.
And can cover when you're off or out or.
Correct.
Good stuff. A question. We have a revenue component here for all the permits and those kinds of things as well. I know we have a run rate of around 330.
What? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you with the air conditioning.
A run rate, which is what is used to project where you're going to land for the total year. So that would be where we end up 24 of 330,000. And then right here, we've got about 517,000 that we're proposing, and you're projecting about 360 for next year. So that leaves a little bit of shortfall, but essentially, if we're going to be in a development mode, your department that could totally be covered by permits. Correct?
Well, that is the goal. I think this year we're probably going to be more than what we're projecting or what the budget is for this year.
Cost-wise.
I think we're going to be up around that 400,000 mark.
Right.
Depending upon how things go the last couple of months, but I'm pretty sure we're going to be there. But yes, that is our goal, is to try to get. And I guess the other piece of this is something that we were talking about as well. Is we're looking at our building permit fees, and we're going to be reviewing those as part of this budget process. So before we get to the end, we'll have a recommendation on that as well, because it's been when were they updated last?
21, I think.
20 or 21.
2021, I think. I think the last fee schedule I saw was in 21. But the city manager, per our code, we're supposed to be doing it biannually.
Yeah.
So we're jumping.
BTR is included in that too?
No.
Like you mentioned it, I think those.
Oh, a different review.
Yeah, that is something that we have to look at as well, because that's been a long time coming as well. I don't know if I can be that aggressive though to get that done for this year, but we'll see.
Anything else on that? Moving on.
So then everything else gets lumped in together. I didn't want to break it down because I have to cover all these. Obviously, council, and talk about that, has a slight increase for the upcoming year compared to FY24. City management, 181,265. It's a little bit of a decrease from the current year's budget. Finance again shows a decrease going from. Can't see the numbers from here for some reason. Go over here.
Well, the paper.
Well, I made a mistake there. It's actually probably a 1% increase from what's budgeted last year to this year. City attorney, we're keeping at the same rate as, at least in the general fund, as the previous year. IT shows a little bit of an increase. General government, which there's a number of things that we'll get into here in a little bit to talk about with a little bit of an increase as well. Human resources, little increase there. Grants shows a significant decrease, but we just, in the current year, that 200,000 is what was budgeted for our safety action plan through the Safe Streets for All. We kind of went back and forth. It looks like we're going to be able to get that project underway in this year, so those numbers will accrue into next year, but we don't have to budget for it. Public Works, we'll get into when we talk about utilities, so we're not going to talk about tonight. Other economic, and this is one of the things, if you look at the sheet that I handed out at the table that shows that first one right there, which shows the all funds, what do you call this? The breakdown of employee funding sources, all funds. At the very last position on that table, you have to turn the page over. Under the CRA resiliency, I'm proposing a CRA coordinator / resiliency officer. And in that particular economic, other economic would be the general fund's contribution to that position, which effectively is a 10% of the wages and benefits. I'll talk more about that, I think, when we get into the CRA meeting a little bit later on. Not today, but the next one. How I envision that will work with everything in terms of what our needs are going forward. Public health, things like mosquito control, you'll find in there, the cost for that, animal control as well. And then contingencies, and again, we'll look at that if there's any question on those. Kind of lay out the position chart as well to show you that there is a slight increase in the positions. And again, it's that CRA coordinator resiliency officer position, which is 0.1, 10% of a total employee that's charged to the general fund. And some of the big changes, again, that's kind of affecting the general fund, 5% increase in health insurance. We are getting, especially in the general government cost center, a decrease in workers' comp, going from 80 down to 60, increase in property liability. But as I had said before, the actual cost of the policies are going to be less than what we're paying the current year. It's just that run out that is making that more expensive. I did put money in for your consideration for an addition of a lobbyist. I think that's one of the things that if we're serious about trying to get funding through the state government, in their process for local funding, or through the federal process, either earmarks or grants, that's what cities are doing in Florida. They're paying for a lobbyist. And I actually spread that out over 3 different funds. Besides the general fund, it's also in CRA as well as the utility fund. And so I would estimate that to be a little over $40,000 to fund that. And then again, there's an increase in city events in the general government fund for the 4th and Centennial. And then, it's kind of difficult to figure out what that number should be for Centennial because we haven't met yet, so we don't know exactly what those plans are. But I know we should have the first meeting coming up in August, so we'll at least have some idea before this budget's over, kind of the grand ideas that the Centennial Committee is going to have for the next year. So with that, there's a lot of funds there. Not a lot of fun, but a lot of funds. I don't know if you want to talk about any in particular. Council, I believe. I have to get here. Council should be the very early on. I don't know if it's page 3 or 4. 6. Close. Got to have a revenue there. Yes. One of the things that we did in terms of the increase is on the training. I've increased it from the budget of 28 to 45. That number probably this year is 45 probably wouldn't cut this year. I know that the mayor has taken advantage of a number of trainings. I don't think there's been too much by any other council members. I don't know if there's an intent to do more. And that's kind of, I guess, what I'm trying to drive out tonight is if there is a desire to do more training, going to the different Florida League of City events like that, it would be good to maybe speculate today so I could adjust that going forward.
That emo class in October 11th, I think it is. It's going to be in Tampa. That's the one I mentioned. If you guys want to attend emo 1, there's 2 of them, emo 1, emo 2.
What is it?
Explain that. emo. It's an Institute for Elected Municipal Officials. It takes you through different aspects of local government budgeting process, planning and zoning. There's different modules. You can look at it out online that have all different things. But the first one covers the first part of it, and then emo 2 picks up where that left off and gets a little bit more into the nuts and bolts of some of the stuff. Planning and zoning is a big module in that. And that one's always, I think, Altamont Springs is the closest one to that. But the first one, actually, they rotate. Tampa's one of the sites. So that one you can go to without having to incur hotel costs. I think it's $300, I think, for that class. I can't remember the $300 to $500 for that class. But trained you on some of the stuff that we deal with day in and day out.
We need ink in the budget. Ink in the budget. We need ink in the budget. So these are dark.
I cannot explain that because I was complaining the same thing when I printed it off.
Because
like,
it's so
what is
light.
going on
Like
with this?
Oh, right.
And then of course,
Information is real important in any position, for sure. What I would ask is, if someone I just recently found out that you were taking advantage of this. What I would ask is that, I'm sorry. What I would ask is if one of us cannot go to one of these things, that we bring back to the group what you've learned, what we've learned, because I think that's real important. And I don't know if there's anything against that within the Florida League of Cities that you cannot bring it back to the group. But I think, having 5 of us go, I mean, I have a job, so sometimes I can't make it. But certainly I would want to learn that stuff and have the ability to look at the information and learn from it as well. So I would ask that if anybody goes to these functions and educational things, that we are able to bring it back. I don't know if it has to be in a forum league like this, or can you just share the written information? That would be a Nancy question, but I certainly would appreciate that in the future.
one of the things I'd actually brought back was to potentially get someone here in house to actually do planning and zoning training, not only for council but also planning and zoning board members as well. I don't know if you've looked into that at all, but that would be something different than actual council training. So, from a council training perspective, there's those 2 classes, EMO 1, EMO 2. After that, they have a recurring advanced class that they cover different topics. I've not been to that yet, so I don't know. But the first 2 classes, I would recommend that everybody take. It's just good information. And I didn't, I could bring back and have a session, but
It's not the same.
it's not the same.
Well, it's not the same, but not everybody knows. So, I mean, any information is better than no information.
Yeah, I have the books. We have to share those too. You can kind of go through material slides. I have those. But I mean, if it's something you can attend, it's well worth it. While like I said, it's not a lot of cost. The other aspect of those are the Florida League of Cities convention, which is coming up here in mid-August. There's a lot of networking opportunities obviously that happen there with other cities and whatnot. It's an organization that we pay dues to that help advocate issues. And then an extension of that, they have legislative action days, advocacy conference and stuff like that. And you get together and work on that. Also, with us looking at getting a lobbyist is key to doing that. And I'll give you an example at the legislative action days. I think we went to Tallahassee when Mike Moore for the city of Newport Richey went up there lobbying for the firehouse money, $1.2 million they got. They had the entire council there, met with the legislators as well, and so that presence is important as you try to get those fundings. You go up there, you meet the legislators. Mm-hmm. They see that, hey, you're up here, you're taking initiative to talk. I went up there singly for the city to lobby the 3 that we had, but again, we didn't have the power of a lobbyist. And all that stuff that goes on with that. It was just me up there. I shook Edward's hand, Brad Yeager's hand, a few of the others went around and we advocated on stuff that the league was putting out there about. There was a bill that was going to take away the 25% upcharge on the water usage of people outside the city, which that would be their impact was. That was a large impact. We effectively stopped that from happening. The league did as well as but people going up there and lobbying those legislators is very important to keep stuff from that from happening. And then as we go forward, as we try to procure funding, it would be good if we had, at least one of us go up there, but obviously the more the merrier. And if we can provide a united front, I know that whatever lobbyists we end up bringing on, they would want us up there to do that. So that's kind of what this budget item would assist with.
Increased or not? Yes. Question I'm asking that.
I mean, I would think we should increase it. Again, if there's a commitment there. This stuff obviously happens if you're working, that you would have to, like I use vacation days to go to stuff. The Florida League of City Conference, for example, and I'm part of the Florida League of Mayors, so we have an event the day before in the same place. So I'm there. It's coming up. Actually, I'll leave Tuesday night after our council meeting. Wednesday is the Florida League of Mayors, and then the conference is Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So it's during the day. So if you work full time, you can't take time off, then obviously it'd be difficult. But it all depends on the participation. You know, I would ask that everybody take advantage if they could. Obviously, work comes first. So if you can't make that, you know, as long as we have somebody covering up there on our behalf, it's a good thing. So I don't know how much. Maybe if you guys are interested, could you let us know? Is that something you would be able to attend some of these things, or if you just can't do it? Because that kind of depends on how much we need to put in there, I guess.
Right. You incurred last year, this year, $4,300. We budgeted 28. You know, kind of blew through that, but like you said, it's a worthwhile effort. He's budgeted 4,500 for next year. Do you want to leave it at that, or which is about the run rate? And you've been the only one really participating, right? And if more of us are going to participate, then obviously the number would need to go up a little.
What did you say it was 43?
Year to date, it's 43.83.
Yeah, this is probably going to be
$5,000.
Yeah. Well, the conference coming up in August is this year's budget too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but that's a local one, though, right?
Well, it's in Orlando. I'm sorry, it's in Hollywood actually.
I thought it was in Tampa.
Well, the October one,
Yeah.
emo, I've already attended that, so I won't be this. I'm talking about the Florida League of Cities Conference, which is in August.
So you're going to incur another piece. So that's going to push it up to 6 or whatever.
There's more than that. Those are 3 days,
That's
4 nights.
4 days.
and you got a hotel in there is going to be a big cost, right? You know, $1,000 a night at the beach. I get it.
Yeah, that much.
I think putting it in the budget isn't a bad idea.
No.
So I just think we all need to be cognizant of it. I mean, I didn't know that we had a budget for this.
Yeah.
I'm on the council longer than anybody, and it would have been nice to have known that we can even go over budget. You know, not that, just would have been nice, but
When I got elected, actually Nancy had reached out about going to the EMO 1 class down in it was travel somewhere down there, and I looked and I noticed that there was going to be one in Tampa, and so I said, well, I'll wait till in October, whatever, go to one in Tampa, so there's no hotel costs. I can drive down there. So I did that. Unfortunately, and I would have done the same for the EMO 2, but they never bring it to Tampa. So Altamont Springs was the closest. So there's no option there. The other stuff was just the annual conference, and that, like I said, those happen every year. And you know, again, we should all really be there. We're a small city, so it makes it tough. But as much as we can participate in these things, it's important. So, and there's costs associated with it.
we'll come up with the proposed, and we'll see. We'll go from there. I mean, this is not the end of the budget, so I'm totally in for education, and I think we need that, and absolutely bring something forward.
Very good. And hope is obviously that pays dividends with money coming from the state, federal government, because they see you, they shake your hand, they're more apt to push to have that money come down here. And it was a lot of learning, obviously, that process. Just to go and be a part of that, where you meet with the different legislators, it's very worthwhile to kind of know how that portion of it works. We kind of sit here and we hope to get some of that stuff, but all the stuff that they're working on, those different bills that impact us greatly. Like I said, we had that one with the 25%. If we was to lose that, that's a significant revenue hit that we would have to make up for somewhere. And there's other things that talk about the short-term rentals, and there's all kind of bills. We kind of hear about those as they all pass, but that's an opportunity to be up there and say, hey, this is how this affects my city. This is going to cost us this. So if you guys enact this, vote for this, it's going to take a hit to our budget. We're going to have to raise taxes to make the shortfall. So they need to hear that stuff from local cities, because a lot of times they're up there, you know, unless they came from a background municipal government, you know, they're just, you know, they got a much larger constituency and they aren't necessarily thinking about what individual cities need to do to run effectively.
Mhm.
So they preempt us from some things, which is a bad thing because then it takes the power out of our hands to where we can't legislate those things. So there's a lot of things up there that we need to be engaged with to prevent bad things from happening later. Hopefully that helps.
I agree. Training should be in there. I agree.
Moving on, general administration fund. So it's covers the positions again on the list of breakouts. So general administration will cover the city manager, operations manager, city clerk, and grant coordinator. Not too much difference here from the previous year. Again, you know, I'm curious about the some of the different numbers in here that I want to go back and check again on, like the retirement contributions. I mean, something just doesn't look right to me, and I don't know if it's historically the numbers were off or if they're off now. So that number may change, but I'm still looking into that. But from the operating expenditures, really not much difference from other than down from the previous year.
Yeah.
Any questions? If not, finance real quick. Again, a slight increase in total over last year. Really not much operational difference. One of the things that we talked about and we're looking at, of course, is the changeover in our financial package, and everything we've looked at generally falls within the dollar amounts we're already paying for Black Mountain, which is our financial package. What isn't covered in there is the changeover from this to actually implementation. That's where you start seeing a significant difference. You know, some of them could be as low as 15 to 20,000. Some of them are north of 80 to 90,000. And so one of the things that we didn't talk about as part of the CIP that we're going to regroup on at another meeting is looking at funding those implementation costs through Penny for Pasco. So just something to talk about at that point. But if we're going to be doing it, we're going to be spending implementation fees, unfortunately.
Just to let you all know, so that EMO 1, those are always on a Friday, Saturday. So it is only one day during the work week. So it's in the one for October is October 4th and 5th.
Thank you.
What's the date?
4th and 5th. So Friday, Saturday, 4th and 5th, and it's at the Embassy Suites in Tampa. $300 is what covers the cost. So it'll be $300 per person.
$1,200.
We have all four, yeah.
Moving on, the next fund is the city attorney. The next account is city attorney. We're keeping that number the same for this year. I think that, you know, this is one of those numbers that you know, I've been going back and forth with increasing and not increasing. Originally, this number was higher. I've taken it back down. I could recommend before this is all over that we take it back up. But on a normal month, with some of the changes that we've made in terms of operation, so we've been looking at different ways to try to reduce costs without reducing effectiveness. And so, you know, like lining up planning commission with council meetings. So in doing that, it reduces travel time, right? For when one was on a Thursday, one was on a Tuesday, we are getting hit with 4 hours of travel. And so lining those things up. So those types of efficiencies that we could find, we've been doing it. Meetings that in the past may have been done in person, where the city attorney would come here. We're doing more with Zoom. So we've been trying to reduce those down. So with that concept, I was seeing a couple months in the 13 to 14,000 a month range, which would easily fit within the 80,000 here. And of course, this is the attorney costs are spread: general fund, CRA, utility fund, and stormwater. Yes, and so unfortunately, the last couple months we've been using a lot of city attorney time because we've been doing a lot of changing the codes, which is a costly endeavor, unfortunately. Plus, we get a little bit off of those efficiencies that we found because the need to have meetings off schedule with the city attorney. So I'm going back and forth. I think this is a good planning number. I think at the low end, it's a great number. I have doubts right now, so just be prepared if I change next time we get together.
I'm looking at that too, and if I aggregate all those 4 funds that you're talking about, we budgeted last year 160. The run rate that I'm projecting is about 186K. So we're going to blow through that by about 25K. At that level, and if we're going to be on track for that level, does it make sense to pursue looking to hire full-time? Yeah, at some point in time, you have to make or buy.
Well, so the only thing that I'm not sure of with that is, what can we get, or what probably is, what is the number that we'd be willing to settle for? Right? The number most likely is going to be if it's a full-time position, or is it part-time, non-benefited? I think that's a question to ask me. But you're probably, in that 120 to 130, at least wage-wise, to get someone with at least the experience that you want.
What's the run rate total that we're looking at for the attorney?
This year, I'm projecting 185K.
And that's only going back to January.
148.
See, that's right. So she's fully baked in there. So 185. You said
100. That's what I'm projecting. That's given the average run rate of 148K per year to date. It's projecting that through the end of the year. That with 148,000 that we've incurred year to date, and if I run rate that through the end of the year, assuming we're going to continue to use her, and actually we're going to be having a lot of meetings here, so that should land around 185,000.
Yeah, and I've asked the same question, and the part that really troubles me is the amount of legal that we have to use. That's an uncapped expense the way it is now. We just keep, if we hired somebody full time, we're capped at whatever, say 130, 140, and they're dedicated to us, and we don't go over that. Of course, now we're at 140 already. We need a couple extra meetings here and there with staff. I mean, it could go well above 185. So it's a very large variable expense.
Go ahead, Lisa.
The city attorney is the only person that gets travel expenses. Is that the only person that gets travel expenses to come work here?
Well, she gets paid her hourly rate to travel here,
Yes, it was in the contract.
and they wouldn't have took the contract had that not been in
So you're saying you can get an attorney for $130,000 a year? I think you're.
I don't think, I'm not saying what you would.
I'm not an attorney, and I don't even play one on TV, but I think that's lowball. I mean, you're paying your what are we paying our finance director? $130,000 a year. You think,
Well, if I could give perspective, Newport Richie, what they have an arrangement with Driscoll. I want to say that's around 130. Don't quote me. It's not over 140. But somewhere around that number, and he's dedicated to the city on Tuesdays and Thursdays every week. I don't know what other arrangements they have.
so it's not full time; it's 2 days a week.
Well, it's full time Tuesdays and Thursdays.
So what happens if you call him on Mondays?
He's still available, but he's actually on site Tuesdays and Thursdays. So he's still available for other things, but he's actually on site at City Hall Tuesdays and Thursdays. Outside the meetings are on Tuesdays and whatnot. But that's the arrangement. Again, I don't know a whole lot of detail behind that, but that's what they do.
I just, I know we're using a lot. I understand what she charges for. I've kind of looked at that. But we also use them. She has a lot of resources behind her that she doesn't have the answer to something, which none of us have the answers to everything. She has resources behind her to answer our question. She's got experts in many different areas behind her. You hire a person, that person does not have the answers to everything, and so then you're going to have additional costs because that person will have to consult with another lawyer about X, Y, Z, and then so you might have a cost of $130, but then you're going to have consultants along the way doing that. So I don't know if that's going to be financially a good decision or not.
And we have that today. We don't use that firm for everything. There's certain. I'll give you another example.
What do we use it for?
Well, no, we have other attorneys to.
Well, that's through liability insurance.
So there's I mean, we don't use Trask for everything. There's certain instances where they don't cover it. We do something else, and there's obviously with Nancy, with the firm, there's other attorneys in there that specialize in different things that we may need.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we're paying that same hourly rate no matter what we use. Okay, so it would be that 210 or whatever it is. We get those other attorneys. Again, how that would work with a full-time attorney. There may be some costs there. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's I think there's I don't know. I really haven't researched what other cities have done. I think it seems like a lot. I mean, it seems like a lot to me because when I was in Michigan, I was paying $120 an hour for a city attorney. So the costs down here are a lot different than those places. But I think taking into account those differences, we use it a lot, but we don't use it as much as we think we use it. Really look at it. Would anybody we get in a different capacity, would they be able to do all the things that their firm is doing for us in terms of representing us for the different types of things that we could do? And that's what you'd have to make sure of. Because what you don't want to get is someone that can only do half of what you're already doing, and now your costs are uncapped on the other way, which are a lot higher because you don't have a contractual number keep it locked in. And I'm sure the rate that they're charging us is not the rate that they would charge someone walking off the street. So
I know before we had James. I don't recall what his salary was. I want to say it was around 100 or something.
I don't know
It was a
what
very
it was.
good deal we were getting. I know when we went we were basically realizing it was going to be almost double the cost because he was not charging us a lot. And I don't know when he was here, he was obviously full time right around the corner. When he needed another attorney, if we paid this expense, it'd be interesting, I guess, to look and see what some of the past years' total legal fees were with his salary, anything above and beyond that, to kind of see where we're at.
I kind of think it's two different animals. Jim Matthew and
It is.
this.
Apples
I mean,
and
just
oranges.
totally. You really can't compare and contrast the two.
Well, I'm
Jim
just
was
thinking about
great, but he he's a Port Richey resident, so I think a lot of stuff was, what do you call it?
Neighbor rate.
Free. Yeah,
Yeah,
neighbor
neighbor
free,
rate.
free. Yeah, pro bono. Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
pro bono, kind of like. So I don't think you can compare the two. I think if this is something seriously you're considering, I think this is longer than a 1 or 2 meeting discussion. I think this is maybe if you want to look at it for next year and really investigate it and look at it, I think that might be a better solution. I certainly don't want to make a rash decision on such an important position as our attorney for the city, which will protect us from anything. I think that needs to be a much more in-depth discussion and investigation to see.
And
nobody's. All my suggestion was, since I brought this up, was there's a lot of cost here. Are we getting our bang for a buck? Should we consider other alternatives?
Yes.
And that's all I'm looking to do. We can throw a number at it now. We can leave it at 180, 160, 120, whatever we want. But during the year, do we consider other options? Maybe an option like Newport Richie's doing with 2 days a week. Maybe Driscoll, maybe he'd like to work here. I don't know. The reality is this an opportunity that we can look at going forward?
Yeah, and I want to reiterate, I'm not looking to make any rash decisions at all. And I'll be first to tell you, I love Nancy to death. Nothing wrong with Nancy at all. So it has nothing to do with that.
No.
It's just, it is an uncapped expense that we don't have a whole lot of control over. And so let's just look at opportunities and see, and maybe we decide what's not worth the $10,000 a year we might save. We should always look for.
If we can get better value, we
Yeah.
should.
So I think it's a great point. But
No, that's all. And if we can think smarter and do things differently, you can say 4 hours a week or a month or whatever.
Recording stopped.
That's $1,000. That's $1,000. For
yeah,
2 meetings.
and we spend $1,000 a month just to get her here.
More than that.
Oh, right. So if it was somebody local,
Yeah.
we wouldn't
So-
have the trouble.
That's the unfortunate part of it. That's the way it is.
Because how much of it is the travel?
Yeah, it's an hour each way, so 420
So yeah. Oh,
420 to get here for a meeting.
But if you do a Zoom meeting, then
We can
that's simple.
definitely
That's
look at shaving that
so
cost
maybe
there.
we go into this with our eyes open, know what happened last year. We can change process and potentially have a savings in it. So
but like Matt said, he's combining meetings on the same day, and that's
Right.
making a difference
that's
too.
all
So
good.
yeah.
So do you want to leave it at 160 or 150?
Well,
You're still thinking about
yeah,
Okay.
I'm still going back and forth. I mean, the other thing that could impact this, I've been talking to her about. So another cost with legal piece is our prosecutions for code cases. We talked about what those costs are versus what we're coming back with, and we've been discussing different ways that we can address those cases, because a lot of the time there are a number of times when people won't show up and they'll end up getting an arrest warrant because they don't show up, or we decide that they've fixed whatever the issue is and we get rid of the citation. So one of the things that we were talking about is on the Tuesdays of the council meeting, because she's been, effectively coming up here early, and we also schedule some of the in-person meetings that we need to do, or if it's the week with planning commission in between planning and the council meeting, what we were talking about is kind of a diversion program that, those people that are going to get citations or have gotten citations, she meets with them and the building official or code official at that time to kind of go over what the citation is, see if it can be worked out. We think that there's merit to that from the standpoint that people will obviously know that they have to go to court if we can't get it worked out, which is one of the complaints we sometimes hear is I didn't know why I had to go to court. But if we could, again, divert some of those from not having to go to court, that's less time that she'll be spending on those Thursdays for prosecution and reduce our costs. So I think there's some things that we're looking at further to help reduce what our overall cost structure is for the city attorney that I think will be more productive. If we can get it so we don't have to send a resident to court and get compliance, that I think is a better outcome. So again, it could reduce our costs in doing that.
One of the other things that I noticed, I didn't see any legal costs going directly into the building or code enforcement fund or cost center. Right? So is there going to be an attempt to try to drive some of that in that direction and kind of see, because if there are costs, legal costs attached to that, it ought to surface there.
Yeah. It would be good to be able to do that. I think the weakness right now we have is the way that the billing happens is we don't have good accounting for it. We have a certain accounting of it, but we don't have a complete accounting of it.
You mean when they invoice us?
Yeah.
Well, if you don't pay them, then they're going to ask questions, and then you start getting that dialogue process. Yeah. But if they know that we need a breakdown, like if we're taking people to court for code violation, and just indicate that they ought to be able to. I know attorneys; they keep track of every 15 minutes, and away it comes on a bill, right?
Almost their invoices, they're pretty detailed, aren't
they? They're getting better. I mean, they're not to where we would like them yet, but they are getting better. I mean, we've had those discussions, to try to get a little bit more, because you might remember that if you remember back, they would be just kind of groups of things. They'd be like $500, and there may be 3 or 4 things listed there. And so we've been trying to get those broken out to be more, okay, this is a code enforcement case. So we can identify at least the case with the cost. But there's still costs, associated with questions that are coming from code or building department that we're not capturing. And that's the area that we just don't have a good handle on yet.
Would it be helpful to, I don't know if they do this or not, but provide kind of our categories, our cost centers, so that when they invoice, they actually tie it to our cost center so that it's easier for us to allocate, as opposed to going through the invoice and trying to figure it out ourselves?
Yeah, well, I think when we're able to run, we can do that, but we're still crawling. So
we've talked about a magistrate in the past. Where are we with that?
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
That is kind of log jammed, waiting to get the council to start talking about. I mean, actually, we have a list, much like what you guys asked for at the last meeting, dates, everything like that. And there's like 6 things that we need to get in front of you guys. And it's just, trying to.
That would help cut the attorney costs down as well. So that's that's something that we've brought up, but we haven't moved forward yet with that.
Yep. Exactly, and that that conversation about the court cases and converting that really is an interim step to that, because we knew that there would be a time that it would take to do all those things. So we need to get it in front of you. We just haven't found the time to get that.
Thank you.
Moving on. Info technology, in a slight increase on that one. Not really anything spectacular, hopefully.
Does that include the recabling stuff that they talked about?
That's in the penny for Pasco.
Oh, that's right.
This does, cover the ongoing cost of once we have transitioned, hopefully very shortly, to the new environment. This fund will reflect those costs.
The new website in here.
Yes, I believe that is the first one. One of the things that also occurred in this as we're moving to the new environment, we were using Laserfiche as our archive. Unfortunately, to have it still work in the new environment, we were going to have to upgrade that. It was going to be an expensive cost. So we've decided to not use that. We're looking at different alternatives for our archives now. And we feel that actually with some of the applications we have with the Microsoft Office products, we'll be able to do the same thing. And that's significant. I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $6,000 or $7,000 saving over this year.
What's the professional services line?
Yeah, so most of that is the Thrive.
That new
Yeah.
security
Yeah. The servers in the cloud, the storage, all of that. Then we have the large general government accounts. And I've already talked about really the major things here. One, the change in the workman's comp going down. Also, the cost for the liability insurance going up compared to this year. But overall, it'll be a decrease. Talking about here in the 328 professional services, we added 13.5 for the lobbyists, if you want to proceed with that. And then the $40,000 we put in there for this event.
you got what 20 for each.
Yeah, I mean that's just again a planning number, but that's how I broke it down.
Christmas gift certificate,
Yeah,
employees,
I was just gonna bring that up, thank you.
can we increase that?
Well,
From 0 to something?
Well,
It's been zero forever.
No, it's
No.
only been 0 since 21. That's a big dissatisfier, that's what I've heard from the employees a lot. I mean, it's not a lot of money, but.
well, it's not necessarily the cost. The issue is the legality of being able to do that. This is something actually that internally we talked a little bit about in terms of ways to improve the organization. I know it was stopped like it shows there in 2021. Talking with the city attorney, she feels that there are legal issues with city spending money and giving gifts to the employees. So we're trying to figure out ways to handle that maybe going forward.
Did she explain or elaborate on why that would be?
She did. I don't have it in front of me, so I'm not going to try to attempt all that. But
Employees, it's
I
not
can
like
get that.
We're not like we're giving it just to one, or that we're doing it across the board.
Well, every state's a little bit different. When I was in Ohio, there was no issues with it. In New York, they started. Actually, New York wasn't an issue. In Connecticut, you could do it, but it had to be approved by the city council. The document, effectively. Then with an accounting of what the expenditures were for. In Michigan, it was a flat no. You couldn't do it at all because within their constitution, they had what they called a gifting prohibition. And so you couldn't give anything of value to a resident or a business or even an employee other than what is considered a regular benefit. So each state looks at it differently. And so that's the question that I did ask. I will get you that answer. Off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly what the logic was, but she felt that there was not good ground to stand on with doing that.
I'd like to know what changed between 2021 and after that made that change.
Details, please.
Any other questions on that?
The stormwater utility expense, that was a large.
Yep, that is a result of the discussions at the last meeting, going from the 905 per unit to 1220. I will say that I don't believe that number is an accurate number, and I say that only because as I was preparing that line item, I noticed how some of our parks utilities are being charged to a different fund, and I need to find out why that was first, and I'll probably be making that adjustment later on in the budget process. But, so this really only accounts for City Hall and the fire department, but none of the parks. And there is a charge, or at least there are ESUs charged to the parks as well, so we adjust those.
July 4th and the Centennial,
Get up to 40,000.
35.5.
No, it's the 40 city. Yeah, the actual
Next
it
column.
started. Yeah, it started at
So that's
35.
last year.
but
Okay, what up to 40? Thank you. Sorry.
Not a problem. And I think that's the number that as we get in, especially in the Centennial, hope goes up. Both from the standpoint we're going to be doing things, and from the standpoint that we're getting, revenues in sponsorships as well.
Thank you.
You know, it looks like the run rate on this is going to come under. We're going to land under where we were budgeted by, a couple 100,000.
You mean total for that?
For 2024, I'm showing a run rate of 1404.
Yeah, and the big driver in that is the state fees for red light cameras.
Right. But you're essentially keeping it the same.
Yeah,
And we think that they're going to catch back up.
No. That's what I said earlier. That I think that's something that we're looking into, so we can understand really what impact that's going to have for the upcoming year.
And that correlates with the revenue side too. So
Yeah.
both of them float the same direction.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yep.
I think it's Jake. Is it your chair hitting the table?
Something is making that noise.
Something's tapping over there.
It's not this side.
Is this it?
We were.
It's the boys.
That side.
If you're tapping underneath or you're tapping your pen, sometimes if the mic's on, it'll catch up.
It's probably me.
I was watching you. So I thought it might be your
All
chair.
right, next.
Okay, so nothing else there.
Keep in line.
Please skip over dispatch, please. Here.
21.
Going down. Give me a few moments as I cycle through this. Building department, almost there.
Fixed hours page 22. Is that what you're looking for?
Yep.
22.
Page 22.
22.
22.
We are on HR
HR.
26.
So again, not a lot of differences here. I think the bigger change is under the technology software maintenance. We are looking for adding a application that will help with our applications and managing the recruitment process for us. Right now, it's being done in a way that I don't think is the most effective and efficient. Requires still a lot of entry on the back end. There are different packages out there that we've been looking at that will allow everything to be done online. And depending on which one ultimately they decide on, could take it all the way in to actually loading it right into our financial software as well. So still haven't made a final choice on that, but that's where we're going with it.
Okay.
And let me say one with that, and other places I've been, we've done the same thing in terms of getting that process to get other people to do the work for us. In this case, it's the candidates that are applying. What it allows is to use employees instead of doing data entry to do higher level things. And as it relates to our employee base, we want to transition into human resources being more of a human resource to our employees. And we've done a few things this year so far that we think helps educate and inform our employees to different things that may or may not be directly related to their work, but what we want to do is spend even more time going down the road doing that. And we are talking about doing more training, especially on the IT side with our employees, but also looking from the holistic approach to getting our employees to be stronger, more confident, doing things that make them more balanced in everything they do. But you can't be doing that with an employee if they're spending a lot of time doing a lot of data entry. So that's kind of what our strategy with this is to get that type of work done, not by us, which allows our employees to do a higher level of work that benefits the organization in a better way. Grants, again, we don't have any grants on the books right now that we're expecting for the general fund. So obviously there's nothing there. Public Works we'll talk about when we get together the next time. Again, other economic environment, that particular fund, that is the 10% of the wages and benefit costs for that job or position I had mentioned earlier. We'll talk more about for the CRA. And just maybe to qualify why there's some coming out of the general fund. As you know, not all of the city is CRA. There are portions that, especially from the resiliency standpoint, are on the coast that we believe this position will be working with. So that's why we looked at it from the general fund, because we know that there's going to be areas that aren't covered by CRA that individual will be working with. And give you maybe a broader down the road, as we transition land out of the CRA, most likely that load onto the general fund will increase as well. Public health, again, animal control contract and refuse pickup costs, as well as the solid waste assessment, are in that particular line item. Not much different than the current year. And then finally, the last one we're talking about is contingencies. The biggest number, or the biggest thing we need to talk about in contingencies is the CRA cities TIF share. So that increase that we saw has good and bad with it. And I'm talking about the tax base. The good is that it's growing at 10+%, and more taxes get collected. The bad for the general fund is with that increase means more money has to go from the general fund paid to the CRA. I believe last year you took the ebb tide area out of the CRA to kind of reduce that number back down. We are working right now looking at what areas in the city can come out as well. We've identified at least 2 parcels that we believe, don't make sense in being within the CRA, and that reduction, significant reduction in the CRA footprint, or dollar-wise, would get us down around that $700,000 number to pay to the CRA. My goal in this would be to get it, no lower than what the current year's number is, 671, but also maybe have an increase in that. So we can reduce it maybe a little bit more, but I think we're going to be right around the $700,000 number.
But that, on these newer developments like Keys Cody River and Villa Bay, what's the protocol to pull those out of CRA? Because obviously they're brand new, all put together. Why don't they get, as soon as they open, why aren't they pulled out of CRA?
I don't know that. First off, Villa Bay is one of the not 2 that's in my mind right now that equates that. That's like the 3rd one in my mind. The difficulty I have in that is that today we look at it as not necessarily needing it, but again, we got to be looking down the road as well, because once we pull it out, it's out.
Right.
And so we need to be careful that when we pull areas out, that there isn't the possibility that there could be issues down the road. And that's one that I'm not saying is an issue, but it's one that I think we need to think about before we make that decision.
Like, so that's number, single owned, that's number 1 taxpayer in the city.
Yeah. No, it's a healthy number. There's no doubt about it. But again, and so the Keys of Cody, I think that's another one that again would make sense pulling out. But I think we need to think about what the future of that is going to be as well.
What's the big apartment complex on Washington?
Abigail.
Yeah.
Court.
I think again that whole area is one that we're probably going to be focusing on for CRA opportunities. So don't necessarily want to take those out, because I think we can draw a really good connection between that area and some of the things that we want to do with the CRA. Yeah, and that's
So that's
Yeah, by far, those are the.
although the apartments, because they're, again, like you said, maintained very well. But picking up
Turn your mic
around
on.
there that don't.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Could you repeat all that?
Because I'm so quiet. But there are different areas around there that.
Yeah, no, surrounding it,
So, I
obviously.
mean, you can't take out, I don't know, maybe you can, you can't take out this piece, but not this piece, and then you can, you know what I mean, like, that's how we've done it in the past, it has to be a chunk.
yeah.
And I didn't know what CRA rules were, because obviously if you've got those properties in there, at some point, the county or whoever oversees that, come back and say, why you got this in your CRA when it's a brand new property?
Yeah, we're still going through that process to make sure we can do what we're thinking of doing. I mean, at the present time, it appears that we can, but I like to check, and double check, and triple check, just to make sure. But beyond that, it then becomes part of strategy, and those areas, off brand, Washington, Leo Kidd, all those areas over there are areas that a good strategy through CRA to lift it up, I think makes a lot of sense. And so when you start robbing, it's hard if we have to, and keep this in mind, in the next couple of years, we need to make a decision whether we're going to let the CRA sunset or if we're going to renew it. And with that in mind, what I don't want to get into necessarily is a lot of small areas we pull out, and we don't then have a justification for that should we decide to renew that. And again, in those areas, we want to have 100% because again, there are areas there that can use a lot of help. That's exactly why the CRA was created. Where for these other areas, I don't think that argument's necessarily going to be there.
With regard to the CRA, this is the amount that's actually paid out into the CRA fund, which goes to those particular issues that you're talking about, to redevelop those areas in some capacity, whether you put pipes or roads or allow grants for businesses to, revitalize that area. So I don't see it as a bad thing, except that we have to pay it out of the general fund and ultimately have to utilize it. And we've got a significant amount in there right now. I think it's like 3.2 mil, maybe more than that. So,
yeah.
And this is only our portion of the county matches that.
Correct. And keep that in mind that if we take it out, obviously, county match will go down.
Exactly. So
and that's why, again, what my strategy would be is let's try to keep it at that current number this year, somewhere close to that.
All right.
Because I think there are things that, when we get into the CRA budget, the CRA board talking about, we need to spend that money, we need to do things, and if you've looked at it, you'll see that I'm budgeting a lot of money to do things.
Well, and I have a lot on my list too, and I just want to make sure that we're in sync. Yeah, we'll get there. Thank you.
And I guess the only other thing that's somewhat different on the contingencies, I did lower that a little bit. I think some of the things that, at least the rationale why the number was put in there for the contingencies, we've addressed a little bit differently in this year's budget, so I reduced it down a little bit. But I think generally for our size budget, having 100,000 contingency is probably like the low number to where it should be, but pretty comfortable that we're addressing things that would be contingency based in the future anyway. So.
What's the percentage of our reserves and contingencies? We were at, I think, 33% or something last year, and I was concerned of getting that lower. Did we increase that? What this budget? What are we looking at?
I started to look at that earlier, but I never finished that look.
Next time.
I was going to run that report to be able to see that, and I didn't do it. But yeah, that is important. I think, again, we should, if things go the way that it looks like they're going to go, we're not going to be reducing what our unassigned balance is.
I think it's probably a little higher.
I think we might grow. But again, there's some things in there that like with the red light cameras and stuff that could impact that. I don't think so, but I'm just not 100% sure today. If you asked me maybe September 30th, I'll be able to tell you what that is, but today, not so much. Hopefully not that one. But again, I think that's something else that we need to be thinking about as well. Is that point of a fund balance is really threefold. One is if all of your revenue spigots turned off for 3 or 4 months, you have the wherewithal to cover your costs, right? And so that's one of the calculations. Another calculation you have to put in there, especially being where we're at. If an emergency strikes, do you have sufficient funds to continue operations? And emergent operations, whether it's, spending a lot of overtime for police, fire, and public works, or if it's, hauling away a lot of debris, or whatever those emergency operations are that you need to cover should it occur. The third one is you're planning on doing something in the very near future, so you're saving money. We're going to do $1 million project, and we're saving 200 this year, 200 next year, like that. But outside of that, fund balance to me is a bad thing. I think, from a government, and maybe it's just me, but government should collect the amount of money it needs to operate. We're not here to make a profit, and so that was something that in other cities I talked to councils about a lot. Is it's growing, it's growing, but it's growing beyond what we can really justify. And I think it's something that with a community like ours and the needs that we have, we really need to have a strategy to say, okay, here's what that undesignated fund balance is going to be, period. And if we hit it in a given year, we know the next year we're going to be funding more capital projects, because it really needs to be spent, because we're collecting it to benefit the public, and as we should be doing.
And we need to be spending.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's no shortage of projects. So that is close to being 7. Thank you.
Wow.
Almost got a photo finish.
Almost. The next we've included on your desk, unless you have questions. I'm sorry, I don't know if there's any questions before we start talking about the schedule.
Good job.
No questions. Schedule. So our next regularly scheduled budget workshop will be August 20th.
No,
Do we change that
remember
one
we
again?
discussed that because it's the general, it's the election.
Right. We have to talk about that today.
Yes.
So we need to reschedule that because there's a primary that day.
Thank you.
You and your elections.
Move it to the Thursday, the 22nd.
And then the following Tuesday, is that kind of close together? To get
Well,
stuff done? I
Tuesday
don't
is our
know.
council meeting.
No, but on here it says
So-
budget workshop on the 27th.
So on that, the 27th was a worst case scenario.
Okay.
That if we couldn't get through everything that we needed to talk about, which I think based upon the way that we blew through it tonight, which was fast, I think we can get through everything on that Thursday, so we probably won't need that. I think once we're done with these kind of informative workshops where we explain what the budget means and everything, the next milestone date is that September 5th public hearing. And I think right after that hearing, you really start your deliberation. You then heard from the public what they think about what this budget is looking at. And you can start deliberating after that. So I think 27th was only if we didn't get through everything. But I think we can. So really, if we do it on the 22nd, if that's the date, we should be able to get this budget done.
5 o'clock?
Whatever time you want, we're at your disposal.
5 is fine with me.
Well, we can remember what you're talking about. What day?
22nd.
22nd.
22nd at 5.
I'll send a calendar invite.
With the time so that all of us show up.
Yes,
Wide
ma'am.
open.
So that was August 22nd.
Yeah.
So then after that second meeting, after that next meeting, then what we do is go back and look at the rate and be able to adjust the millage rate to ensure that we're on track, right?
Well, so the way that it should work is, you get into deliberations and
Right.
you start saying, we want this, we don't want that, or we want to reconsider this, how it is. And then once you have that number, we'll have definitely by then, all the revenue numbers in. we think is pretty solid because there's still a couple from the state that have not been finalized yet that we're still waiting for the state to publish. So we'll have all those revenues. So, effectively, what is in front of you today is balanced at the mill rate. That is the rollback number for this year. So you can make those choices whether you want to increase it or decrease it once we get into deliberation.
So this budget is based on a rollback 63782.
Yep.
You got some questions, Dan?
When do we want to talk about that?
What is it?
It's a list of things that we'd like to do. So it sounds like that's coming in later meetings.
Whenever you want to talk about it.
Well, I mean, you'd mentioned that you've got some ideas to spend some money to plan on doing some stuff, and there's certainly not a lack of infrastructure items in the city that need to be addressed. And my thoughts were right off the top: sidewalks, roads, pipes, pulling the commercial piece into the CRA blight so that we can get that grant program rolling there. Dredging. Looking at the problem areas in the city where that needs to be potentially, maybe we can address that. And I know there's a committee going on with that, so that could, follow along in that too. But essentially, trying to set something aside to assess that. Looking at the BTRs for rentals, getting that addressed. I know the attorney was supposed to be working on that, or somebody was working on that. So,
Lift stations for storm drains.
there you go.
Big should be right on top of the list. It's not.
Water treatment plant.
Yeah,
Water treatment
treatment
plant should be on the top of everything because without
Exactly.
that water treatment plant, the rest of the pipes are no good. We have to start at the beginning. And I know we're looking at that grant program, but we still have to have the funds to do that.
So far, everything, the only things that I don't have a good answer for in your list that you talked about are dredging.
But
That's-
you
that's-
indicated you had talked to the county a little bit about that. So things are,
Yeah.
So maybe we need
Have you
to.
heard back?
I'm waiting for a date to meet with the resiliency office of the county to talk about their coastal management program. And obviously part of their coastal management program is the canals. So as soon as we get that meeting set up, we can start that dialogue in terms of what they have available. The county is bringing on a grant writer as well, I believe, or someone that is from the University of Florida that is going to help communities within the county that are part of that program find ways to pay for these different types of projects. So we've started that process. But I mean, all those things, you'll see in the CRA budget, money for sidewalks and roads, parks, things like that. You see in the utility budgets the start of line maintenance and repair for sewer system and water system. You'll see a lot of money being spent for well rehab. We're putting aside, and actually in the grant fund, I think we have $4 million being set aside for what the cost is for the water treatment plant. Initial preliminary study and design. You'll see in the water utility, the city's share of $80,000. I don't know how the head budget is for that. You'll see the start of a program to replace water lines. You'll see money in that fund since we're doing the water plant study, that will also cover some of the utility lines as well. In sewer, you'll see the sewer management study, so we can start getting a handle on what needs to be changed and upgraded with the lift stations as well as the lines. So yeah, it's a lot of money going out the door next year. And again, we already talked about the stormwater utility where we have money set aside for the management plan as well as 100,000 plus number now off the head for improvements on the south side that we wanted to start.
And these studies essentially are more into us going and applying for grants, showing the need, and potentially helping that process move forward.
I mean, that definitely is going to help in our ability to get and find grants, no doubt. But I think, from our perspective, from my perspective, what it's going to do is lay out what the work plan needs to be in the future. And there's only two ways really to fund that is either find grants or find it within your fee structure to pay for it.
And I did notice that the Brasher Park Beach was off the charts. It's really spiked up on water quality, having a negative that they've closed that beach. And this is one of the things I wanted to point attention to is if we can build a story case that water quality is down and potentially, just don't know all the facts, but if stormwater's causing this, then maybe this can help us, make our case, right?
The Grand Boulevard expenditures, obviously we've got, and I talked to Nia with MPO board today, so once we get those engineering back, we need to set up a meeting with her and Nick, I think. Nick might have the ability to fund some of that. It has to be MPO funding it. That would probably be March of next year. And I know that's a hot item for the golf cart crossing stuff for the city. So when we get that back, I don't know if we need to look at this from a budget perspective or not, but depending on whether we get some help or not, I think we still probably need to move forward with doing something there.
Yes. That is not, as we see here today, considered within any of the budgets, right? Because I knew that we were going to be getting those numbers actually, hopefully next week, as to what the costs are, so we have a good planning number with it. The second thing is, once we have the numbers, we have to determine where we would pay for it if we didn't get any help from anybody else. So those are the reasons why it doesn't really show up in these costs right now, but we'll know soon. And
I just make sure you're thinking about that, obviously. And then the other thing is, obviously, we're meeting next week with Newport Richie and the county on property across the river. That's next weekend.
August or something next week. No, it is. I do remember that.
I don't know what's going to come out of that.
No idea.
And we'll obviously bring that back once we find out. It's the private county owns there.
Right next to Whiskey River.
Right next to Whiskey River, where they wanted a boat ramp and whatnot. And of course, our piers there, and I think Newport Richie's trying to buy the hotel. I think Catherine Starkey is the one that put it together to talk with the three of us about collaborating on something there. So once we get some details, we can bring it back. Whatever. County City.
There may also
It's the 5th.
we may also be talking about the funding tax.
Yes. And that's on the MPO funding list too, on down there. Which, I know Jack, for one, wants to see that come up, but it's long term. I think that's going to be something we have to look at. Depending on what happens at the waterfront and all that, there's a lot of things in play, obviously, but there's opportunity for some funding there for the underpass. Anything else? Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion second over here. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Workshop concluded.